guys, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends. I, Anuj, on the behalf of Elets Technomedia, welcome you for this exclusive episode of Elets Innovation Talk. First of all, a big thanks to all the audience and viewers for making Elets Innovation Talk a big success. And many of the videos have got a very good number of views. Again, thanks to you all, and we promise to continue the trend forward and bring you some more innovative content and some distinguished leaders who have brought about change in the society. So, today's leader is going to be nothing different, a very young entrepreneur, Ayushi Mishra, a Forbes 30 Under 30 awardee, and we take this opportunity to welcome her. Just to tell a little bit more about Ayushi, Ayushi is a biomedical engineer and holds an MS Engineering Management from Johns Hopkins University. She started her first venture, Marigold Health, while still in graduate school. It is a digital health platform with artificial intelligence to scale peer support and therapy. Marigold Health is currently funded by National Institutes of Health and Rock Health Foundation. In late 2017, she moved to India to work for Dronamaps, a company co-founded by her longtime friend and fellow Hopkins student Utkarsh Singh. Dronamaps specializes in large-scale mapping with drones and extraction of geospatial analytics from it. Ayushi specializes in solution design at the intersection of design, technology, and business. She is passionate about the use of emerging technology to create a positive impact on the human condition. During the COVID 19 crisis, Drona Maps volunteered their platform to 7 states across the India, acting as a command and control center. The deployment was inspired by Hopkins COVID 19 dashboards but ended up providing deeper analytics like patient tracking, healthcare infrastructure tracking, containment and hotspot analysis, predictions on spatial and epidemiological spread of the disease at the district level of almost 130 districts across India. Ayushi has been recognized by Vogue magazine as one of the 8 women in the STEM leading the battle against COVID 19 in India. Once again, a big thanks to Ayushi for taking out time and join this Elite Innovation Talk. Over to others who would be moderating this whole discussion. Thank you so much, all the audience.
So, I welcome you, Ayushi, to Elets Innovation Talk. And today we have Ayushi Mishra, who is Chief Operating Officer of Dronamaps. And thank you, Ayushi, for joining us today. And so, the first thing that I would like to ask you is, in your opinion, how is drones and mapping can be beneficial for disaster response, specifically in controlling the spread of COVID-19?
So there are two aspects to your question. One is drones and one is mapping itself. Like when you look at mapping, geospatial intelligence, like as a research field, has existed for a while. So that entails, like for example, understanding when it comes to COVID-19, we're looking at the spread and distribution of patients, quarantines, like testing, vaccines, in fact, even like bed distribution, oxygen, like supply, and how the logistics of all of these are happening, like in terms of even like food and civil supply. So there are like spatial and epidemiological dynamics that are coming into play in all of this. Then the second aspect of your question is, where do drones come in, right? So there are two aspects. Like drones, at the end of the day, it's basically a vehicle. So it's giving you a certain data source. Now, this data source could be either like like live drone feeds. It could be imagery that is captured, like which is high resolution in nature from a mapping perspective, and give you like an understanding of areas that like temporary urban settlements that you don't really know exactly what is laid out there. And then the last aspect of it is like how I'm pretty sure you've read news reports of drones being used for just assessing how effective a lockdown has been in a particular area, dropping packages. In terms of packages, of course, I mean, we do have challenges of doing this on a larger scale. But everything else can has been and is being deployed at a fairly large scale.
Great.
If you want,
So,
so, sorry, I
sorry.
think there's one more aspect that we can talk about. So, like,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
we
Sure.
talk
Continue.
about, yeah, disaster management in particular, right? Like, as a general. So, in that scenario, what we're looking at is, so Dronamaps is a command and control center that you are like deploying for integration of all your geospatial data, like existing satellite, existing like GIS surveys, imagery that is collected on the ground, like images, videos, surveys, everything that is collected on the ground. So you're creating a sort of vertical integration. So it's way beyond like like pure GIS or pure like like drones essentially, and it becomes like an integrated source of truth that enables decision makers to come to like rapid action based off of any data feed. So this has been deployed, for instance, for Uttarakhand. If you look at disaster management in general, like this is NDRF and flood management in Uttarakhand, and for COVID-19, it's more analytical in nature, where you're looking at a command and control center deployment that tracks like number of patients, number of beds, number of like the total testing we're looking at, vaccination, and a 360-degree view of the entire problem, including like the field, like the field force on the ground, like what are they observing, the temperatures that they are checking with people, and how is it like how is the data like actually telling you about the spread of the disease. So whether it's rural or urban, which areas are affected more, you have like a daily reporting system, you also have the ability to actually trigger alerts and configure alerts by district, so which means it's easier to act on it essentially.
So as you just told us that data from drones are way beyond just the GIS part, and it gives quite a detailed feed about the situation, and that helps quite a lot in controlling disaster response. In what ways the person should ask or the authority should take an action towards the situation. So my next question is quite on the similar grounds. It is about how Dronamaps is actually contributing to aid government, private firms, or institutions in measuring the pandemic and controlling it, the adversity to an extent. And, we also have this kind of, we should, keep in mind that there is a expectation of a third wave of the COVID. So, it's keeping all this as aspect in mind, how is Drona Maps contributing to to the situation?
So there are three aspects to it. Like, just to give a historic context on how we started working on this, right? So both me and my co-founder Johns Hopkins, we were in Punjab for like road tracking, so road network and drones, like when COVID crisis like had just entered the country. So this is March 11 last year, and we were so one of the officers basically like asked us that if we'd be able to push something like a COVID India dashboard, which is on similar lines as the Hopkins dashboard you see, which is what we did in like about a day's time. We already had the geospatial expertise. What has happened though over a period of time is that this dashboard, because our command center now, which because it's intended for administrative uses, it has become much deeper. So it's less, it's like fairly wide, but also deep information about each district, each block, each village. And the reason that kind of information is required is because you're always optimizing for action, right? Like at what geospatial level of like what's the lowest unit of cell that I can gather information for and be able to act on it, right? So initially when we started with Punjab. We actually managed to scale this to 130 districts across the country, almost 7 states, with a variety of deployments. This included Meghalaya, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, so on and so forth. And over a period of time, we noticed, of course, like after the first wave, like different the demands have become different. Like till that point, contact tracing, or during the first wave, you were looking at contact tracing being at the center, and we were also funded by ACT, which actually helped us like to be able to do all this pro bono for the longest time, like do this at scale pro bono. And this year, though, I think the way the deployment has changed is essentially what you're looking at, as I was explaining earlier, is more of a 360-degree deployment that actually tracks like what is happening on the ground. So there is, of course, like patients, there are like number of beds occupied when with ventilator, without ventilator, oxygen, the availability of oxygen, storage capacity, how much is being used, even the trucks that are transporting the oxygen, and also like the ASHA workers on the ground, like what exactly are they seeing, capturing all that data and being able to pull it in one center, and then analyzing all of this. So one of the key things that we are aiming to do within our all of our deployments is to be able to tell strategically, what any intervention would lead to. So the predictive analysis is to a certain degree, like we're already, like we have tie-ups, like even with, for example, Punjab, like we do have tie-ups with Cambridge University, where we are like enabling their forecasting models within ours as well. Like we also have like estimations on how much healthcare infra would be required given like a certain number of cases per day, if you're looking at. So a large part of all of this is to be able to give the state enough time to prepare, like if in case things go south, and which is kind of the largest part about the third wave. Like you're essentially preparing the systems and ensuring, and to a large extent I would say actually, like the states that we were deployed in, like adaptation had happened fairly like early. But even then, I mean, there are lessons everywhere, right? Like we were not, for instance, tracking oxygen for the longest time, or we were not actually looking at food and civil supply, or the rural urban divide was not something that like was actively being tracked until unless like there was a realization that the wave is moving like towards like remote areas more quickly than we actually imagined. So that's where, like, you would like we adapted the command center to be able to access like data from on the ground, because it was coming anyway. I think like it's actually a myth when we say that we actually don't have data. Even in the government, like I actually think like what really happens is not a dearth of data, but being able to integrate all that data into actionable insights, because it's fairly distributed. So you need to be able to work through the silos and be able to integrate all that for actionable insights, which is kind of what we do for the third wave. Just the preparation of and making sure there are triggers, alerts associated for each area, each and there are also like emerging villages and forecasts of like particular areas which need attention at every 2 week interval. So just to make sure that action is taken, and the authorities have significant time to be able to calibrate their action.
So I think that was a really great point when you said that authorities are working in silos, and there's it is much needed that we should integrate the systems to have a farther effective response as compared to what we do as of now. And so the next thing that I would like to ask you is, as you just told about how Dronamaps is contributing fairly have actually have this, what do you say, for the COVID. Yeah, I'm so sorry for the fumble. For the COVID and managing the situation. Uh, do you is Corona Maps also contributing towards smart cities? I mean, uh, improving the overall livability and the resilience factors of cities by providing their services or the drone mapping and the technology. So how is, if Drone Map is doing that? So how is Drone Map contributing to it?
Okay, so actually, let me take a step back, because that's basically what we do. COVID just happened to be something where we had the expertise and had to, like, apply it in this particular scenario. Um, so in smart cities, what you're looking at is Dronamaps, as I said earlier, is a command and control center solution. And what that means is everything is built on the backbone of 3D drone maps. And it actually like uses your existing geospatial data. It integrates all your MIS and GIS data. So the way I look at it essentially is this is way more geospatially accurate than your MIS data, which is currently being used across the field. And it's also a lot more easier to interpret, because at the end of the day, majority of any large scale enterprise or organization, the data is rooted in places. It could be MIS in nature. Like what I mean when I say MIS is, like, let's say transaction data, or let's say the location of your workers. That's not always in a sense that you don't necessarily need to know the exact location, but you still need to understand the spread and the relative distribution. So in the case of governments particularly, like you're looking at the distribution being geospatial at its core. So what Dronamaps does is like everything, like from your sensors, from like particularly in smart cities, like every sensor that is there in every traffic light, the distribution of traffic lights, the actual location of roads, the plots, the houses, all of this is actually like integrated within this command and control center. Now the question becomes, what is the source of the imagery? Now this depends. Largely it can be done, like even change tracking can be done based off of pure satellite data. And if in case required, where there is like either rapid change tracking required or you need high resolution data, then like in most cases, so we have an Uber model where we have partners who collect the data for us. And in which scenario, like, or even like for example now, as we see drones being adopted more and more, even authorities and enterprises have their own drones. So they collect the data, they onboard it on top of the platform. We perform the deep learning analytics that are required to be able to extract geospatial features like plots, houses, boundaries. And once we do that, like all of the information is then like is a combination of GIS plus MIS data. So to give an example, right, like for example, one of the deployments that we are doing right now is property taxes using drone-based maps. So what you're looking at is a marriage of like rapid drone-based mapping, actual extraction of like boundaries of each of these areas, and also creating a system that does not entirely rely on an expensive technology of data acquisition. So because at the end of the day, drones give you a lot of flexibility to acquire data, but it also could be expensive for a lot of like, so there has to be a parallel methodology for like collecting all this data. And to a large extent, it was actually happening on the ground anyway. So we basically give like mobile applications for these images that you can collect geotag, like raise requests for, let's say, a change. And so let's say an on ground frontline worker or field staff like actually notices that a particular plot is not there in the GIS database and has actually been constructed, or this is 3 floors and not 2 floors. So you can take a geotagged image, you can fill all the form like details on the field itself. This would come in a pipeline to an approval officer who would basically approve this request one way or another, and it becomes a part of the file. So it creates, and also there is a citizen side of it, which means that citizens can come and check their own property tax history, like how much have they paid over a period of time. And what it means for the authority particularly is being able to track who are their who are the commercial entities who are paying the most, for instance, who are the commercial entities who are not paying as much as they should be paying, and tracking all this over a period of like 5-6 years. So typically, 5 years is the satellite is when satellite imagery or geospatial imagery for this is like revamped. However, like a system like this makes it very easy to just track like the geospatial layout and properties alone. Now, if you were to look at it in a larger scenario, right, now everything else that is there is actually a subset of this. So when you're looking at solid waste management, when you're looking at geotagging of your garbage delivery, when you're looking at water sanitation, your assets that are water sanitation like dependent, your administrative authorities that are actually managing those assets, and their administrative links with the mobile applications, with the dashboards and actual usage of water. Same with power, same with like everything becomes a subset of like knowing exactly how it is laid out. And once you do, so at that point of time, essentially each siloed data set is actually borrowing and is like a line of data that is borrowed from this mother data set. And for smart cities, that entails this like being able to integrate all of this again and be able to give insights from it.
Okay. So, as you just said that, Dronamaps is basically providing the command and control solutions to the cities. That's your basic what you do. And COVID came in, and then you guys ventured into in controlling the pandemic situation as well. Uh, so, as one thing I just heard from your deliberation right now, you said that water and sewage and waste and everything comes under become the subset basically. So, is water mapping? When you map how the water resources are being utilized, or the pipelines and the entire system, how is it working? So, do you think mapping such a resource can actually help in conserving such a resource and give you better results compared to when you are not doing such and such an activity.
I mean, definitely, of course, right? Like knowing what exists is like part of being able to, it's benchmarking, right? Like you know exactly how it is being used, what is the distribution, and to what extent can you control it? Like to what extent are industries actually using it? To what extent is it being treated? And all of this, to a certain extent, is happening with either like IoTs on the ground, sensors, like total amount of, you have a vague idea of the amount of water flowing around, right? The only question then remains, and there are then two methods to be able to do it. Like at this point of time, if you're using a formula or an empirical method to be able to track it, that can also be onboarded, and at least like you should be like to a certain extent, it's easy to understand, or it's understandable what is the normative usage, what is the actual usage, and why do you see that delta. So then it's easier to like backtrack and see exactly what is causing that delta. The second aspect of it then becomes like, for example, pollution, or like tracking of like cleaning of like, let's say, rivers or any of these aspects. So technically drones can't actually assess the quality of water. So you would still have on ground like IoTs or like lab testing or any other methodology that you're using to be able to track. What geospatial intelligence can do though on the ground, for example, is like whatever geotagged water testing is happening, all of these are again like they're a function of how spatially like things are laid out, what elevations exist, how the water would flow. So even, for example, as I was talking about Uttarakhand floods earlier, for example, what you're looking at is the possibility that okay, so on January 5th, before the glacier burst, and after, you see a difference of 150 square kilometers in just snow cover in that area. So you are like, to a certain extent, if we are tracking that area, to a certain extent it is possible to at least have a predictive alarm or a warning system. Once you simulate the entire like flow of water, to a certain extent you can tell exactly what assets were damaged, how much soil erosion are we looking at, how much damage to the dam are we looking at. And this is post facto. Like if you were to actually like do this at a recurring basis, then you could also, like when we're talking about going back to pollution, so when you're looking at this same methodology is applied actually in soil mapping also. So like IoT sensors that are applied on a farm field, like pH, nitrogen, potassium, whatever it is assessing, like basically predictions on the areas where you're not assessing it, to be able to calibrate your fertilizers and pesticides better. And same thing with water, like a cohesive, comprehensive method can actually make this a lot more accurate, like the entire process, be it starting from water, like soil, even agriculture, and going onwards to like how the water is consumed. So the entire pipeline can be streamlined a lot better.
So from water to agriculture, Dronamaps is also there in agriculture also when talked
We have
about
worked in
soil
agriculture,
quality.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's great. Having a product which is so diverse that could be utilized for different zones and different domains.
We have
So
actually
coming,
worked in sorry.
no, that's
Just
okay.
like
Come, yeah,
little bit, yeah. So I was just saying, we have
sure.
worked in agriculture before. The only struggle that we have personally, like at least Dronamaps as an entity has had, is that it's not a significant contributor to our revenue. But just going by market analysis, like agriculture should be like a large domain of how drones are going to be used. So that meant that we do have deep learning algorithms for pest and disease, like extraction. We have modules for actually using like on agricultural fields, yield estimations, and also like how water flow or elevations are impacting like agricultural yield in general. Having said that, like we and also like you can have village level entrepreneurs collect the data on the ground and skill development based off of that. Having said that, like as I said, like it's been operationally difficult to do this at a large scale, particularly being like a leaner company. So yeah, I mean, we do have an agriculture suite. It's just not like the major contributor on the business end.
Yeah, but that do contribute. So I think that shows the diversity of the product and how the technology which we talk about, the mapping and the drones, that entire technology can be used and can be leveraged to benefit our not only our resources but even our systems. So now talking about Dronamaps, let's just I just wanted to know in the coming 5 years, what Dronamaps are aiming to venture in? I mean, what are some of your most demanded solutions or products that you think you have currently, and what are you coming up with in the next 5 years?
Okay, so the most demand, like most in demand products that we're looking at as of right now are urban side of it, which I explained is like smart cities and the derivatives. The other side of it, which is fairly like in demand, is disaster management and again like COVID response. So any of these GIS plus MIS like solutions that enable project management or resource management tracking essentially. So these are two which we do see like a fair amount of demand and activity in currently because of the entities that we involve with. Like speaking about a 5 year plan, actually not even 5 years, I would say like fairly soon. Like the short term version of it would be actually the possibility of providing our change tracking and analytics on a larger scale, like pan India, or like at least starting with pan India, and being able to let like people change track like their own properties, for instance. And when you're looking at that, what that means is we can have insurance and banking sector look at it like specifically, and also like same thing with enterprises, the same thing with governments, as to how like if a particular area has been built up or not, if there are any forest area changes, so on and so forth. So there are multiple segments to the change tracking. And then as it evolves, like what you're looking at is the premium segment of it being like, particular geotag plots that if you're looking at tracking, let's say a infrastructure construction project is happening, then like you can basically change track, like automated and like have a reporting system built into your project management that would give you like the progress that has happened on a routine basis, let's say monthly basis. And the premium segment of it then becomes that you could actually use drones and like upload the data, and you'll be able to assess like exactly like the volumetric change as well. So that is a solution that we want to enable to a larger market segment. As of right now, of course, like what we are looking at is very on-prem, very enterprise deployments alone. And I think it was to a large extent from a journey perspective necessary to be able to understand how all of these things can be integrated within the workflow. Because the way we look at it, to be really honest, like for any emerging technology like drones, the hardest part is to be able to come up with integrations in existing flow of work. Because if let's say we were to establish like a separate workflow completely, it's because the applications are entirely in very incumbent sectors. You would find it very hard to get it adopted. You would find it very hard to get them to use a separate platform altogether. So I think the trick that we have perfected over a period of time is to be able to seamlessly work, like take the data they already have, like make it work within our workflow, and then like push it back into the workflow that they already have again. So it's tying the loop that has actually helped us a lot. And yeah, the future plans basically look like making this wider and democratizing the access to this kind of data and change tracking over a period of time.
That it's really great to know more about Dronamaps, and thank you very much for being with us. So Ayushi,
A
thanks
pleasure.
again. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.